What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. Fresh off, we played Funky Films last week. That was a fun time. Um, Coming back for another review tonight. Looking back at another 2024 release because 2025 has been sparse at best so far. We are talking about a movie based in real events 50 plus years ago in 1972 in Munich. We are talking about September 5. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I can go ahead.
Uh, I thought it was amazing, honestly. I really enjoyed it. I thought that the editing was incredible. Um, the way that they used that to really, pump the thrill into it. Like it's a story that I assume most people know. They know the ending, but to keep that thrill when you know the actual ending it's something. Especially going with the perspective that they have. It's just the ABC news, broadcast rather than the actual events that happened.
hmm
But yeah, I thought it was a great idea to look at it from something that was really influential, not just for this event, but the same guy, Rune Arledge, he was responsible for making sure that ABC ran the Iran hostage crisis 24/7. Um, so I think it's a pretty incredible movie. Performances are all good, but really it's the standout is like the director and the editor, in my opinion. And
Yeah, I mean,
also the production people that recreated everything. That's
mhm.
pretty nuts.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I
look
mean,
was so true to time.
yeah, it really was. And
And
I'll add to that, like just sort of the ethic of journalism, right? And what it means to have this kind of film get made in this era, right? Like we're in a very fraught political time, and having a film like this, I think, is really fascinating, especially as sort of the mainstream media, ABC being one of them uh, has come under fire from all different directions, from the left, from the right, up, down, center. Um, and sort of like what does that mean? What does it mean, and what history does sort of that phrase mean? And we really get to the root of that in this film, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting for me having spent the last 5 years working in TV production, like live broadcast, to see something like this where I didn't. I mean, I knew the end of the story, but I didn't know anything about how sports kept the feed up. It wasn't like we're not throwing over the news. This is our thing because we're here on the ground.
yeah, I mean,
I
it
didn't.
propelled that guy. Rune went to become the president of ABC not too long after.
Yeah. Um, and just to fully immerse myself in this picture with what I know about obviously half a century later what broadcast television is like was fascinating to me because I do work in a control room every single day and I have been in breaking news situations, obviously much lower stakes than we see in the movie, but still to see what it was like 50 plus years ago, but also have so much familiarity with terminology being used and speaking patterns and roles in the control room and in the production team. Like that enhanced the viewing experience for me, just having my background and experiencing this history through a narrative drama. So yeah, I the film is flawed, but I really enjoyed it.
All right, well, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot of this from the online discourse. Obviously, it's not really my place to speak on it.
Oh,
But sort of portraying the Palestinian terrorists as this faceless mob, um, has been getting a lot of backlash, especially during the
Yeah, I've seen
ongoing
people talk about that.
conflict.
I really don't understand. Like, obviously, I understand like talking about it, but for this movie, it wouldn't make any sense. Like, you're going over the recreation and the production. You do deal with like some of the morally questionable things that they do. Um, but for the most part, that's how the news
That's how
treated
it
them.
played out.
I don't
It's
expect them to change history to,
right.
I mean, it should be conflict. Like this is a major thing. It was a major thing, the Palestinian conflict. But
Hmm.
also yeah, I mean, it's important to know that Black September was like the worst offenders of anything like
Terrorists.
that. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
they were pretty bad.
yeah,
And
and
just like
again,
how the film. Go ahead, George.
I was just gonna say, Ben, like you said, they weren't gonna change the history, and as I said before, the production value and the production design were all true to time, but the movie has to be true to history. And
And
so
also,
portraying them like that is how the media portrayed them 50 years ago.
and they talk about some of the stuff like in the background. Obviously, you don't know exactly what people said, but like they kept mentioning, like a lot of these people, this is their business is not the politics. Their business is just a show, point a camera at something, and you see like different people grappling with the what that means.
Mhm.
At one point, they didn't know whether they were helping the terrorists because they were showing the police on their broadcast,
Well,
and
that's the whole crux of the narrative
and
is
yeah, it's an
whose
interesting thing.
story is it?
And it's
Is
been
it ours or is
explored
it
in
theirs?
like fake things like network and stuff like that about sensationalism or night nightcrawler, nightwalker,
Nightcrawler, Jake
nightcrawler.
Gyllenhaal.
Always messes me up because it's the X-Men, but um, yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting way to look at it, but I don't expect anybody to have that discourse. Besides, this is 1972. People back then didn't know anything. I mean,
I'm
people
just
now
I'm
still don't know
sharing.
much. But I don't think you can criticize the movie for that. I think that's an
I'm not
unreasonable
saying
thing.
I do. I'm just saying that it has
Well,
sparked this conversation.
you said it had flaws, so
I was taking an objective stance.
take a stance. I don't care what people online think. I care about what you think. It's the whole point
Nicest
we
thing you've
do
ever said to me
this.
on this podcast. 170 episodes, and I finally get a compliment.
Well, it's like I can read all this stuff myself.
Fair.
And I get it, but it's always brought up and stuff like this. People brought up with Munich, 20 years ago or whatever. And that one
But
probably did have a
Is
better
that
chance.
20 years ago already?
Yeah.
yeah, but it also wouldn't make sense given the way that this
No,
film was made, right? Like a
no.
lot of it was some of the real footage. So,
And I
and
loved,
it's in real time.
loved.
Like you need that's what it was seen as.
And
Like
I
the
think
sequence,
that's the strongest thing in the
right?
movie is they're
Like that's the point.
seamlessly splicing in the archival
Yeah.
footage, archival like um Peter Jennings, voiceovers and stuff. So they have actors playing those guys, but they're also just showing the actual archival footage. It's
Hmm.
incredible. But yeah, I think a lot of the things that they do talk about beforehand is to lead into like how they actually said it on air because you
And
can't change that. You
one thing
shouldn't, at least.
that you just brought up there, Ben, with the inclusion of the archival footage, especially of what the actual broadcast was. That's the archival footage they're using. Max, I know you saw the Q&A after the film.
I actually
Um,
didn't stay for it, to be quite honest.
Bummer. Am I the only one who
Yeah,
saw it then?
Yeah.
I was gonna stay for it, but I didn't have time. So I had
Yeah.
to run back
Oh
here.
boy, I'm the only one who saw it. All right. Let me pull up
But
my notes here.
I'm sure I could find it
Um,
online. I'm sure it's
Probably.
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. It'll
Um,
get released at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I took a few notes on it. Because they brought the lights up and some people walked out like you guys
Yeah, I
did.
mean I did read on
And,
some of the production and stuff, but that may have
but
come from this.
one of the things I found most interesting was a lot of times when movies are trying to play to history in a setting like this, they green screen the monitors and then in post add in the archival footage. And what the director of the film talked about in this Q&A, and Peter Sarsgaard touched on it a lot too, was in this control room that they recreated, they played the broadcast to give the actors something to react to. And one thing that Sarsgaard really emphasized was when you're acting, and what's his name? John Magaro plays Jeff Mason. Um, he and Peter Sarsgaard both really emphasized that you can get by reacting to green screen, knowing what the story is, knowing what the script says you do, knowing what the director encourages you to do on set, but to have the real footage playing uh, kind of took them to a different headspace when they were trying to portray all of these emotions and through these scenes where they were getting obviously not the real emotion of this is actually happening, but it added an authenticity to their performances and informed their performances to the point where they could take on these emotions and then this reaction as though they were really there. I thought that was really fascinating about how they went about the production by putting the archival footage on screen in the moment rather than throwing it in after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
I thought that they're absolutely right. It did make the performances better. Because I've seen movies where they add the archival stuff in post and you can't
Or
really tell, but you can
just
tell here when it's better.
or just anything green screen.
I mean, we live in the age of CGI, so
So Anthony Hopkins said, if you're acting and it's green screen, it's pointless.
Was that in the same interview where he talked about being Odin and like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just
People are
gave
they
me
asking
some
about Odin.
slapped a
Is like,
beard
background
on
and then
me.
gave me some
I don't
lines?
know. They paid me a lot of money. I
Yeah.
offered my 5 minutes, and people won't stop asking about it. It's like I've won what 3 Academy Awards, too? Can't remember if it's 2 or 3.
By this point, it's three, I think.
Yeah, I won.
Signs of the Lambs and The Father are the two that I can think of.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to. I don't know that he has another one. He's been
I
nominated.
thought there was a third one.
He's been nominated a whole bunch too.
We'll take
Yeah,
that.
All that good stuff.
Um,
but yeah, no, I definitely think that the whole going through the effort of recreating the actual ABC, like trying their best, doing all the research to recreate to the best of their
well,
ability the
that's another
control
thing
room.
that John Magaro talked about. Um, he he probably had the most going for him in terms of the research he did for the role as Jeff Mason. Jeff
Well, he
Mason
already was in
Jeff Mason is still alive,
well,
so
so is a few of these people.
but
Um,
he got to sit down with Jeff Mason, go through the script, go over the character and what what the real emotions were. But he also, fun fact, spent 2 months in a New York control room doing live sports broadcasts, observing and then participating in live sports broadcasts so that he could understand everything he was talking about.
makes sense.
I'm glad
Now
he
I
did
want to do a
preparation.
movie where there's
I think
TV news so I can understand what I'm doing because that's my
sure.
background now.
All right.
I don't know.
I'm
I
not
just thought
following
like
this.
in I don't often learn much about like not a lot of movies do Q&As with the cast after it airs in the theater, which I would stay for it every single time because I love
You
learning about
could
these movies.
you can look up lots of Q&As, just
I mean,
interviews.
I watch interviews that are done in the press junket. I watch premiere night interviews just for work. But
I
like,
don't mean the press junket. I mean just like random people interviewing. Find the weird YouTubers, interviewing David Lynch on a Friday. That's where you get the good stuff. You don't get it on Jimmy Fallon. He's going to ask 5 questions that are stupid.
We love you, Jimmy.
No, we don't.
I love you, Jimmy.
I'm
Please
staying up
hire me.
tonight.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's really nice that you have that real connection. I mean, I know that's what a lot of people have done. If the guy's alive and you're playing a guy, you talk to him.
Yeah.
If you don't,
I
you get
mean,
criticized for a
we
good reason.
we talked about this 2, 3 weeks ago with Timothy Chalamet talking to Bob Dylan.
Wait, you talked to Bob Dylan?
Ben,
I
do
thought
the
he didn't.
impression.
But
I don't think you did.
yeah, I thought I saw he wasn't that.
I know
Yeah,
Mangold did.
Maybe for like
I
a
mean
second.
that's still different.
Dude,
I'm pretty
George,
sure. I'm pretty sure Chalamet said that he talked to Bob Dylan about this.
I mean, Bob Dylan tweeted at him in that weird format.
that's
Like,
about it. You have to understand, George, is that Bob Dylan is only seen out in public for 1 hour, and he does it very frequently. He tours, but other than that, you will never find him, and he will never show up anywhere. He doesn't want to be seen. He wants to be
Maybe I'm
left alone.
maybe I'm thinking of Mangold then. Academy Award nominee James Mangold.
It could be, I don't know. Bob doesn't really talk to people. It takes a
No,
lot to get him to do an interview.
I can confirm that Mangold went through the script with Bob Dylan, reading every single part except for Bob, and Bob read his own lines.
I mean, they
That is
did over
true.
the phone.
Jackass.
Yeah, just Bob Dylan's just such a hermit. Like I can't see him talking to people.
So let's talk performances here because these are real people and real events, and taking on such a heavy subject matter is really fucking difficult. Who really stood out to you in this cast?
Ah,
well, I mean, I think the one thing you look for in a movie like this with the subject matter is did they do this respectfully? And did it feel like they did the right amount of research and foundational work to sort of bring these characters to life? And I think they did. Um, we talked a little bit about on our Saturday night episode, sort of what it took to take, what it looked like to take some liberties. Um, and it's a completely different situation because you're talking about a comedy show versus a serious
this is also meant to be
geopolitical
like
event.
a docudrama. It's meant to be
Yeah,
a fictional documentary
yeah.
in a way.
And I think they did the work they needed to make it holistic, but also respectful.
No, I agree. And it is really tough, but I'm glad that they shit all over the German leadership for their absolute failure.
Yeah,
Like if you actually read the event, and you should, um, go and read the first, second rescue attempts.
yeah,
It's the most ridiculous thing you'll ever read. Like they just had no training, nobody knew what was doing. At one point in the final like shootout, you had German officers shooting other German officers. Like it's unbelievable how bad they were. Didn't
yeah.
have enough snipers. Nobody knew that there were more kidnappers, and they were told terrible.
I mean, the whole Olympics was sort of like this reintroduction to Germany. And I think it was the games were called like the Games of Light or something like, they were like the games of
Yeah.
it was this sort of renewal of German innovation and its return to the world stage in a less um uh bad manner. Because the last time Germany had hosted was the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And so they had like stripped away a lot of the security measures from the Olympic Village,
Well, they
and
really didn't have
they didn't
any
have any really.
because
Yeah,
this is
No,
during West Germany, they
yeah,
were split up, and West Germany's whole big thing was like, all right, the military is not here, we're going to be really safe. And it
yeah.
was
They
like,
they're overcorrecting.
yeah, not too long after this happened, they immediately set up like an anti-terrorist like local somebody that could legally work in Germany because the whole
Hmm.
thing was the troops were not like constitutionally not allowed to go and do anything. They wouldn't let Israel do anything. That I don't know what they would help. Like at one point, the Israeli security guy that was there, just yelled in Arabic to the hostage takers. He's like, "Lay down your guns, save your lives." And then they just started shooting. Like, why would you say that to them? It's like, your life is coming to an end. Please don't waste it here. Oh, of course, they're going to start shooting everybody. But yeah,
And
it's
it's
just a disaster.
and it's interesting because I mean, you think about West Germany, like, and its political space right now. Lots of pockets of right wing and sort of neo-Nazi groups have popped up in West Germany. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's important to also, they
like
don't
that's where
mention
we are right
this.
now.
They don't mention this in the movie, but like one of the reasons that Black September could do this is because there's still Nazis in Germany. So you had neo-Nazis basically feeding them information, security stuff, anything.
Here's
And
where they'll be,
that's
what
so they
room, what
did it.
building.
And it wasn't very hard. They're just like, hey, nobody's here. You can literally just walk right in. I shouldn't be laughing. It's just like it's such a ridiculous failure that
Yeah.
there's nothing else, yeah, to say.
I mean, it was a failure of preparation on the part of the security, but also a failure of execution. And
It's a
we're
failure
talking
of
about both
everything. It was
sides.
a constitutional failure too. The fact that they had no idea that things could happen in their own country. Because what they ended up doing was like the police were the only ones allowed. So they just gave them little tanks. They gave them snipers, despite these people having zero training for this stuff because they're local police officers. So no
And
wonder
they
they
talk
were
about that in the
shooting at
movie.
each other. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it was a big deal. Obviously they mention it in the movie, but it's amazing how much they screwed up. And then they do include the part where the chancellor came on and it's like, yeah, I think everything's gonna work out. It's looking like it's gonna be a nice happy ending. Okay, man.
Well, that also comes into play in the booth or in the control room with Jeff Mason making the call to say, as we're hearing it, the hostages are all free. They all got away.
Yeah.
And like there are times as a producer when you have to make a call on something, either during broadcast or before, and sometimes it's the right one, sometimes it's not. I'm fortunate enough, knock on wood, that most of my calls have been the right one when I'm in crunch time. Again, not as high stakes as this. I want to be very clear about that. But the pressure of that situation is felt by I think anyone who's ever been a news producer or a sports producer. Again, lower stakes for most of us. I'm
I
going to
feel like
keep emphasizing
I
that.
get the point, but
But like just the decision making factor is already tough enough in a position like that. And then to have it amplified to a degree of a billion trillion with a hostage situation and announcing that over the air when you know that as soon as you say it, it's going to go global with ABC is saying the hostages got away.
yeah, I
It's
just feel like
nuts.
this is not the same like this is an exclusive situation. The only reason that happened is because ABC was being watched by almost a billion people. Like I don't think it's fair to like no offense, but I don't think you
No, I'm
compare
not
this.
comparing my experience to it. I'm just saying, in my experience, limited as it may be and limited in scope as it may be, is a certain understanding that I have of the core level of the decision making process.
I mean, you feel responsibility putting
Yeah,
out a
Yeah,
story. Sure.
it's I mean
it's a
there are a lot
responsibility.
of
Thank you, Max. It's a responsibility for the story. That's what I was getting at.
there are a lot of things going on here too because like this isn't just a bad source. Like the literal German government said that the hostages were safe essentially. and they
Right.
lied.
And in my workplace, a government source like that would have been enough for us to say,
The government
hey,
source is a government source. Like,
that's confirmed. That is information we can go
yeah.
with on air. So Mason made the right call.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more just like the pressure of it and the eventual realization that all the hostages are dead, not safe. That
There's a
is,
difference.
it's more of a setup. Um, but yeah, I mean, the pressure's all around. Pressure of like, are we helping them? Are we hurting them? You know, what if we showed them all die? And you
Well,
got Rune at the top who's like, money, 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 money.
I mean, it's
yeah.
interesting because think about a lot of the um, political assassinations that happened around that time too, and then the Vietnam War and all of these global events and journalists grappling with some of the same questions of what can we show, what do we show, how do we, like George, you were talking about, how do we shoulder that responsibility? Um, I mean, I think this film does a great job of portraying what that question feels like. Like that's from the get-go, we know that's what the question is going to be, and it's
Yeah.
drawn out over an hour and a half. And they try and give us an answer. I don't know if it's definitive, but
No, I mean, I don't think
it
it's
shouldn't
supposed to
be.
be. But
And
Yeah.
this,
I do like that there are different people in the networks. Like some of them have more or less moral qualms about if something goes wrong. And then there's Rune is just like, is this gonna hurt or help ratings? And if it helps, he doesn't care.
it's funny, Max, you say
Um,
that they get this to be 90 minutes, but this is, it was a roughly 20-hour ordeal, about 4 a.m. on September 5th to just after midnight on September 6th. And just the relief and disbelief and shock and sadness felt by these people once it was over, knowing that this phrase is going to sound terrible, but the good guys lost after all that they had been through. This crew, this sports crew covering the Olympics, these are not newscasters. They are not used to this. But this
yeah.
sports crew, after 20 hours almost nonstop on the air, is the toll that that would take emotionally and physically. They portrayed that really, really well. I mean, we didn't see a lot of the aftermath in the film, but we know obviously the history of it and what happened
Oh
after.
yeah. We do see the actual archival footage of, Jim saying, whatever his quote was, my father always told me, like, I, I can't remember what it is, but the worst thing has happened. That's what I remember. That's a famous quote, and it's yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, especially after like the belief that everyone was okay, like the belief that it had ended well.
Yeah, it was the highest high and then the lowest low.
Yeah, the not even false hope, but like
Hope.
literally lying, like they believed
It
it,
it
you
it
know.
was it wasn't lying. It was relying on bad source.
It's
But the source
lying
was lying.
from Germany. I'm
Yeah, I mean
not.
that's
It's
the whole
Germany
point
lying.
is
It's not the ABC team lying.
Goodness, George, you are just like Mr. Defend the Network over there. No, obviously,
I'm
I'm talking
defending the
about the Germans
broadcast team.
lying.
I'm defending the broadcast team. All right, not ABC
I,
News,
I feel
not
like
ABC Sports.
I feel like you need to understand that Rune Arledge was like a giant monster, like a gritty, gritty, gritty monster. He's in there, but not all these guys are the same. I mean, some of these guys were really into, you know, not
I
that.
didn't expect Peter Sarsgaard to have as little screen time as he did.
I mean, he's in there a decent amount. I wouldn't say
He,
he's,
this is Jeff Mason's movie. I'm just gonna say that.
well, yeah, because Rune is literally in the back. I mean, that's what he is. Like he's the figure in the background, making sure everybody does stuff, but also unsure because he has no idea what he's doing outside of sports. And I love the little things where Jeff comes up to him and he's like, "Oh, well, why don't we just do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a great idea. Do that one. Do that right now." It's like the only decision he makes is turn on the cameras and, the decision to not give it over to news. But a lot of like the technical stuff, they're like, how are we going to do this? It's all the people, around him. You get people just figuring out stuff on the fly. But yeah, it's a cool movie. Hour and a half, really tight, really thrilling,
It's an easy
heartbreaking.
watch, and it is engaging as hell.
It's a good movie. And I think we can all toss a recommendation for it.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
see it.
definitely go see it.
Provided you can handle the depressing ending.
Yeah, be
All right.
prepared for a downer. Obviously, if you watched our episode this far, spoiler alert has been in effect the entire time, but it happened.
50-year
always-
spoiler alert.
It always is.
You should know what happens.
The hostages are not coming home after 50 years. Unfortunately.
Oh, with all of that being said, we go from a 90-minute watch this week to a 215-minute watch next week. We are going to be talking about The Brutalist, nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards, including Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones.
Man, we're going from Holocaust adjacent to Holocaust adjacent movie.
Yep.
All right, well, shalom.
We will see you for The Brutalist next week.
Good night.
Good night.